Hey, what's everybody up to? It's good to have you. Hopefully you like and share this post to let everybody know that we are live here on Unlocking Your Potential. Here to hopefully expand our awareness, expand our consciousness, so that we can actually move into a space of understanding for ourselves. All right. Of course, I want to stop and see who's in the room this evening. Most definitely. Let's see. Oh, it's been a while. It's so good to have you back, sir. It's good to have you. Mr. Rubin, it has been a minute, but yes, I think we're going to have some fun. Just the brief conversation that I was able to have with Brother Keith just briefly was like, ooh, this is exciting. Miss Carolyn, it's good to have you. Yes. Thank you so much for you guys and what you do. It's so important. Hey, how you doing? It's good to have you. If you guys, of course, are out there, hopefully you are in the comments. I'm gonna double check here, and I know they were having StreamYard was having a few issues with Facebook. Okay, I think we're good on Facebook there. Gotta make sure I do all my due diligence and get this thing promoted. And everything looks like everywhere you got YouTube's working, Facebook is working. So, this evening is going to be great because the last time I had a conversation with Brother Keith was actually, it was sometime before Bishop's transition. Bishop was, I believe he was at home And so, but I think he may had been dealing with some of the illness, but it's really full circle to have him back on, because Bishop was quite alone out whenever he began to expand his consciousness and go into, of course, he started in inclusion, as most people know. And so my goal this evening with this conversation, of course, I want everyone to know and see that he's an author for sure, 100%. And I want everyone to know also about his book. Of course, I had it in the description, but we want to make sure I pull it up here, because I want everyone to go out, and I don't know why you wouldn't want to purchase this one particular book, because of the fact that this book it's got rave reviews. I want you to see it here. It's right here on Amazon, of course, and I want you to see all of his books here that he has, right? Of course, the Jesus Untangled series that he has there. There's some really good stuff, but this is of course, we could talk about these other ones, but I can't wait. There it is. It's on Amazon. It's available both with on paperback, and it's also available on Kindle. And this book is, oh man, it's so encouraging, because this book was ranked #1 in different categories. But the one that I thought was really neat was spirituality and mysticism or something like that. I thought that was so cool. Like, this is really cool. Rave reviews. We're going to get into this. This is covering his take and covering what I call is one of the forbidden gospels, right? So we're gonna jump into this conversation, and if you guys, of course, I know you're gonna have questions, and so good to see you, Miss Georgia, Miss Brother John Thomas. Yes. I haven't talked to you this week. We'll have to make sure we catch up. Miss Teresa, thank you so much. I know that people will begin to jump on here even later, and they'll just have to catch some of this in replay. But without further ado, we're going to get this show on the road. Hey.
Hey there. Good to see you, Malachi.
Ooh, it's awesome. So where are you located?
Yeah, my wife and I moved back to El Paso, Texas about 5 years ago. That's where we met. We went to college here, and just moved back here about 5 years ago. For my dad's health wasn't so great. So we moved back here to help my mom with him. And yeah, we're still here. So
looks like you, I follow, and looks like you're having a good time, especially, I don't know how you are able to, I guess it's a gift. Did you write before you, like, as a pastor, did you write? Like,
yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I self-published about 6 books before I got a publisher, which was Choir Publishing. And so my first book with a publisher was Jesus Untangled. And then I've written, I think The Common Sayings of Jesus is like my 12th book with Choir. So.
Gotcha. So you had books, but were they before you actually left the church?
Yeah, there's a few, like those 6 books I self-published. Yeah, they're out there. I don't recommend them because it's before I had deconstructed all my evangelical conservative Christian theology. I don't really believe most of that stuff anymore.
I was just curious, just because of the fact that you've done so much outside, a lot beforehand, and just to be a writer and then to be moved into this space. It's awesome, because the church has 400 years in development, but it's got hundreds of years of developing to be what it is today.
Yeah.
And for the people that would be, if you look at the deconstructing, right, you got former evangelicals, ex-evangelicals, like that's it's a kind of a,
it's actually the shirt I'm wearing right now.
Yeah.
There you go.
I like it. It's hilarious, because it's like That's almost like wearing I don't know, an anti-Trump shirt or something.
It's like wearing a target on your chest. Yeah,
That's
especially in Texas. In Texas, like I wear this out when I sometimes I forget I'm wearing it, and I'll be out somewhere shopping or going somewhere, and I'll notice somebody kind of staring at me, and I'm like, oh, okay, they don't know what this is, and they're afraid to ask me.
It's interesting because I think people think that a person would be fighting or pushing against them when it's really more of a conversation. It's more of something that says like, this is what I experience and this is no longer who I am. Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I have a lot of clothing that I produce for myself. I'm gonna one day make it public where it's like you got so much material, you got resources with Jesus is the co-pilot, you got music, you got publishing. And so my grand big scheme of all things, if you will, is just to have resources. We all need resources so that we can have things that we can glean off of, things that we can use to further our our own understanding. And so jumping into the quantum sayings of Jesus, like how many books did you produce before you have got to this book? And this is a question that comes because when you first leave and first basically something happens and you have this aha moment, is like, I'm no longer that. Matter of fact, we met, you came to Tulsa.
I was in Tulsa. There was a Misfits theology conference, and Brian Zahn was speaking, and I was speaking, and Brother Pearson came, and I was so excited. I couldn't believe I was meeting him in person. That was the first time I met, and then you were there too. So yeah, we both met there.
Jesus, man, this is just like taking me, like, because that event that you and I went to with him was an amazing event. That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what happened was, this is how I think how Carlton and I really got connected. My message that night was, it was something about embracing the mystery. Because so that was right before I was getting ready to write the book Sola Mysterium, Embracing the Beautiful Uncertainty of Everything. And that message that I spoke that night at the conference was really kind of all about where I was going with that book about embracing mystery. So I gave the talk and I finished and I went to the back, and Brother Carlton came up to me and he was so encouraging. He was like, that was amazing. He goes, that should be a book. And I said, it's going to be a book. So I was so excited about that. And that he was so excited about it too. And so actually that conference, that was right about the time I was personally moving out of, so I just kind of finished this deconstruction stuff, right? I just finished writing this 7-part Jesus Owned book series, which is all about deconstruction. It's all about my own personal deconstruction on different theologies, but I wrote it to help other people who are also struggling, with some really toxic theologies and things like that. But when I finished that series is when I was kind of like personally just kind of saying, now what? You know what I mean? Like, I know what I don't believe. I know kind of where I land on some of these doctrines, but personally where I was at was, and this was a big deal, and I lost a lot of followers. I lost a lot of supporters. A lot of other authors that I looked up to kind of kicked me to the curb around this time. Because when I wrote Sola Mysterium, what I said in that book was that even though I still love Jesus, and I think Jesus is still my touchstone, I loved the things Jesus says, the things Jesus does. But what I recognized is that you can find those same kinds of things that Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Gospels and things like that. And you can find them in Buddha about 400 years before Jesus. You can find them in Socrates. You can find them in people like Rumi and Black Elk and so many other mystics from different faith streams. And so in that book, I was saying, yes, I still kind of prefer Jesus, but I recognize that I want to expand my focus. I want to also say that we can also find truth, in the Bible, yes, but in other places as well, other sources as well. And so I was just kind of being honest about where I was at that moment and where I was at in my journey, And a lot of people didn't like that. In fact, I remember sending Sola Mysterium before I published it. I sent the manuscript out to several of my friends who were also authors in the deconstruction space, people who had written forwards to my previous books, and I had done conferences with them and people like that. And almost all of them, I think almost all of them came back to me. One in particular said, "Don't publish this book." Another one said, "I can't endorse this book." I had one of them said, "You sound like Richard Rohr." And I said, "Thank you." And he said, "No, that's an insult." I said, "Well, there's our problem right there. I love Richard Rohr. And so if you think I'm going in the wrong direction, then yeah, I can't change that. And I can't not put this book out. This book was honestly, truthfully where I was at in the moment. So I wrote Sola Mysterium, then I published Sola Deus. And in that book, I started moving really deeply into what I call the second deconstruction. I didn't know what else to call it, right? It was sort of like moving, like I didn't feel any longer that I needed to be a sort of an apologist for Christianity. I'm not a gatekeeper for the Bible. I'm not going to defend the Bible. I'm not going to defend any sort of Christian theology or anything like that. If someone believes that and that's what they want, where they want to live and what they hold on to, that's great with me. I just kind of felt like I was going to move. I'm moving beyond that stuff. And that's really when I kind of went into sort of the quantum direction, more of like the idea about consciousness. Sola Deus, the second book in the Sola series, was kind of about that, like trying to make, to understand this being, this God who is beyond comprehension. That God, I do embrace this idea that God is a mystery, but that doesn't mean we can't experience God. It just means we can't explain what we're experiencing, And so that shift was really important for me. And so after writing those two books, that's when I really started diving into the Gospel of Thomas, and it was so exciting to find the same ideas that I was reading in quantum stuff, and the same ideas I had come across in some other mystics, and like I mentioned, Black Elk and Rumi and some others. And Jesus was saying these same things in the Gospel of Thomas. That was really exciting to me. So yeah, I knew I had to write this book.
Oh my gosh. Oh God. this is oh my God. I know my people, and oh my gosh. They are going to love this evening. Okay. Well, the beauty of it is I did find something that was real beautiful. So as we carry along with this,
yeah,
I found the picture of you guys that I shot when you were there.
Yeah.
And then I also found a video where I don't know what Bishop was talking about, but you sparked something in him, and he just began to, I just always had a camera in his face, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so I'll be able to play that video.
Oh, great.
This is really, really special. And so you guys out there, make sure you definitely keep in the comments. If you have questions, put them in there. I'll make sure I'll look. And thank you for welcoming him to the Expanded Conscious family. Deep dive.
Yeah.
So why did you choose the Gospel of Thomas as the focal point? And what makes this message so relevant in the concepts of non-dualism and quantum mechanics?
Yeah. Great question. It's kind of funny because I didn't sort of strategically sit down and say, what should I do next? It was kind of like I feel like the Gospel of Thomas kind of found me. What had happened was I had read Thomas years before I really deconstructed completely. And when I first read it, I really didn't get it. It made no sense to me. I kind of rejected it. I just set it aside. I thought it was nonsense, to be honest, because so many of the sayings made no sense to me. So I dismissed it. And maybe about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, someone sent me a book about the Gospel of Thomas. It's a really great book. It's by William Duffy, and I think it's called The Hidden Sayings, or the Hidden Gospel of Thomas. Yeah. So someone mailed me this book and said, "Keith, you got to read this book." So I was getting ready to take a flight. I stuck it in my carry-on bag. I get on the plane. We hit 30,000 feet. They turn on the light. I pull out my book. I start reading this book, and it really blew my mind, because what he talks about in the book, in the introduction of the book, is he acknowledges, he goes, most of the time people read the Gospel of Thomas and it makes no sense to them. I'm like, yep, that was me. And then he says, but they don't understand it because they don't understand there's sort of a code. There's a filter you have to use to make sense of it. And if you read it, if you know how to read it, if you know sort of what filters to put on, what lenses to wear as you're reading it, it makes total sense. And then he explained the filter. What the filter is: non-duality and oneness and connection. And I was already open to that idea at that time. So I was like, okay, that's exciting. So, but I was still a little bit skeptical. And the way he convinced me was he talked about saying 7. So I'm going to read it for you, because this is kind of almost exactly what happened to me. And this is the reason why I fell in love with Thomas. So he says, for example, saying number 7, if you don't understand, it makes no sense at all. I'm going to read it. He says, saying 7 is, Jesus said, "Blessed is the lion that becomes a man when never consumed by the man, and cursed is the man whom the lion consumes, and the man becomes a lion." And I just thought, yep, that makes no sense at all. But he goes, no, everything Jesus says, and this makes total sense, right? If you think about it, when Jesus is talking in the red letters in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, when he talks about shepherds, and he talks about, women looking for lost coins, or fathers who lose their sons, or a guy sowing seed on the side of the road, it means more than that, right? It's not just face value. It stands for something. There's a deeper meaning, and you have to kind of dig into it and understand it. And Thomas is no different. So, we can't look at Thomas like it's any more difficult to understand than maybe some other sayings of Jesus. It's just that we don't have that filter. And he says, when you read saying 7, the lion stands for the ego, right? And the ego self is very much dualistic, right? It's me versus you. It's us versus them. I have to have power over you. I have to dominate you. It's all about me and what I want and my desires, and I don't care about you, right? It's very antagonistic, very, very dualistic. And the man stands for, it's a metaphor for the true self. And this would be the true self that Jesus talks about all throughout the Gospel of Thomas. The true self is the one that's awake, whose eyes are opened, who recognizes that he is one with God, and he is one with everything and everyone. And so the right way to read it, if you understand the filter, the way you would read saying 7 would be something like this: blessed is the ego that becomes the true self in Christ when consumed by the Christ, and cursed is the true self whom the false ego consumes. And again, I was impressed. I thought, okay, that's cool. But I was honestly still a little bit skeptical. And then he dropped the bomb. He said, that idea of the metaphor of the lion and the man standing for the ego and the true self is something that Plato talked about 400 years before Jesus, and he wrote it in his Plato's Republic. Now, when the Gospel of Thomas, which was lost to us between 340 AD and 1945, no one had a copy of it. We found it. Someone found it in 1945. When they pulled it out of the jar, it was bundled together with a few other writings that were also lost, and a fragment from Plato's Republic. Guess which page of Plato's Republic was bundled with the Gospel of Thomas? The section of Plato's Republic that explains the metaphor of the lion and the man. It is literally as if whoever buried this in the jar grabbed a page, he pulled that page out of Plato's Republic, because it's the key, right? It's like, just in case you don't get it, I'm going to bundle it with Thomas. So whoever finds this, 1,200 years later, is going to look at it and say, oh, now I get it. This makes sense. And that was it for me. When that plane landed, I couldn't wait to jump into the Gospel of Thomas and start reading it for myself through these new lenses. And when I did that, I really fell in love with it. I started doing a weekly blog series. So every Friday, it was called The Inner Circle. Every Friday, I would publish this, like one of the sayings and kind of my commentary on it. I did that for about 1.5 years. And then once I got close to finishing it up, I decided, you know what? This is a book. I need to publish this as a book. So I did a little fast forwarding. I jumped ahead for about a month and really focused to finish up all the sayings, because 114 sayings, and published the book. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, like, just going back, just out of curiosity. So you would know this. So we have the the canon, right? And we have the Bible as what it is.
Yep.
And of course, there's some things with the Council of Nicaea and
Yep.
how it was all formulated. Was the Gospel of Thomas, along with all the other books, just not included for a specific reason? Or some say it was like the size of it, but it doesn't make sense to me.
No, that's not why. It wasn't that. Well, so it's what the closest we can figure out, trying to piece some things together. But we have a lot of early church fathers and their writings. So we know that Irenaeus, who was around like I think 120 AD or something like 130 AD, something like that. He mentions the Gospel of Thomas. A lot of the other church fathers mention the Gospel of Thomas. So we know it was floating around. We know it existed. I can talk in a little bit if you want after this. I'll talk a little bit about how old Thomas is and how we can figure out how old it is. But to your question, like why wasn't it included or why wasn't it mentioned in Nicaea and all that? So what it seems is that it kind of starts with Irenaeus, I think. He really did not like this group of Christians that were called Valentinians. And the Valentinians followed this guy named Valentinus. And the Valentinians kind of favored the Gospel of Thomas. That was kind of their favorite gospel. Probably because, it's all about oneness and connection, and they were all about that. And so he didn't like that doctrine, right? When you're trying to build a religion, you don't want to teach people that they don't need you. You want to teach them, no, you got to come to church and you got to listen to the bishop and you got to jump through these hoops and religious hoops and stuff. But the Valentinians were like saying, no, everybody and anybody. Like one of the things Irenaeus hated about the Valentinians, and he writes about this, is that when they had their worship services, he was scandalized. They allow women and children to lead the prayers and to pray over people and to pronounce blessings and to read the scriptures and stuff. And it's like, what's wrong with that, right? But again, it wasn't recognizing the authorities of the bishops. So he didn't like that. And so it seems like all of the opposition to the Gospel of Thomas is not really so much about the contents of the Gospel of Thomas. It's really more about the fact it's more political. It's more like the followers of Irenaeus or the proto-Orthodox Christians, all the way up to Athanasius and the Council of Nicaea. That stream, that sort of, flavor of Christianity really opposed Valentinus, and they opposed the Gospel of Thomas because of that. And so, when Constantine takes power, he calls these councils. Athanasius is the sort of presiding over this council. He has the authority of Rome behind him. That's where all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh, guys, we can win this battle. There's been this back and forth tug of war between the followers of Irenaeus and the followers of Valentinus for like 300 years. And now all of a sudden we've got the power of the sword. We have the power of the empire behind us. And Athanasius writes a letter. This is after the Council of Nicaea. He writes an Easter letter. And in the letter, he tells all these bishops and monasteries and church groups and seminaries and things like that. He writes this letter and he tells them to stop using certain books. He says, do not use these anymore, meaning they were doing it. They were using it. And so he had to tell them to stop. He says, stop using these texts, in your homilies and your sermons and your worship services and your gatherings and your festivals and all these things. And the Gospel of Thomas is one of those texts. And so that's when that letter went out. People read the letter. They gathered up all of these texts that Athanasius didn't like, and they destroyed them. And at least one that we know of, one guy near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, at a monastery near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, instead bundled all these things together, stuck in a page from Plato's Republic, put them in a giant jar that was like 30-something texts, sealed the jar, carried it out to the desert, and buried it. And it sat there from like 340 AD until 1945, until it was discovered. And so those guys had copies of the Gospel of Thomas up until that point, up until Athanasius. Even all these early church fathers I'm mentioning that didn't like it, they all quoted from it. And quite often it's funny because they would, in one letter, tell everybody not to read it and it was a false gospel or whatever. But then in another letter, quote sayings of Jesus from Thomas alongside other gospel sayings of Jesus and have no problem with it and felt like it was authoritative. So that's what's really curious, right? It seems like they weren't, as I said, they weren't so much against the content of Thomas, because really The Gospel of Thomas, it's kind of not even a gospel, really. Like a gospel is something like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where there's a birth story, there's a narrative, there's the life of Jesus, there's the calling of the disciples, there's the miracles, there's the crucifixion, the resurrection, apocalyptic teachings, and all that stuff, and all that, and that kind of thing. But Thomas has none of that. Thomas is literally just 114 sayings of Jesus. It's literally as if the disciples just sat down, and anytime Jesus said something, they wrote it down. And so that lends it, that's why I think a lot of scholars take it seriously. Because, even though, and originally a lot of people want to say it's a Gnostic text, it really is not a Gnostic text. It doesn't contain any of the teachings of Gnosticism. It's just a collection of the sayings of Jesus. Half of those sayings, by the way, are in the Gospels we already have. So, again, why would you oppose it? Like half of it's already in the Gospels that you already have. There's just these other sayings that weren't included.
It's so powerful. And just when it's almost hard for us to even fathom or imagine, because the script, the King James, which actually holds the most value in America, King Jamie had that done in 1611. Yes, I said King Jamie.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing to do with King James versus King Jamie, but
okay.
you always noted that King James was actually gay.
Yes, people don't like to hear that, but he was. He absolutely was. That's right.
It's so amazing that we have come to this point, right? We can figure out so much in this country, and I bring this country up specifically because that's where we are.
Yeah.
But in the sense that, like, we can have automated driving cars, but the consciousness of realizing or understanding something such as ancient text that we want to quantify, and make it out to be something greater than our own consciousness, right? Our own ability just to look at life and be like, this timeout, like, this is not making sense. What's going on with this? And so, one, I want to just thank you for taking heed and hearing the voice and taking heed to the calling, because just like this text from 340 AD to 1945, right? There's a lot of people that did not get to experience, right, and have this. And now that we are here and we have it, and it's the way people treat it, it's like, thank you for doing this, because it gives us more resources so that we can actually grow and we can truly expand. Did you find that this text relates to the things of today, like the dualism or quantum? As we talk about quantum theory, we're talking about the more of the things that deal with higher levels of consciousness. Because to me, I believe like this text really does relate and align more with these things that we're kind of just discovering, and really being able to pull in and being able to align these with the quantum field, because it's kind of hard to do some of that with the other texts that were translated, correct?
Well, this is the thing that as I was going through the Gospel of Thomas, you're right. I mean, there's a ton of texts like that. That's why I called it the quantum sayings of Jesus, because I had already been studying the quantum stuff, and then I'm reading the sayings of Jesus and Thomas, and there's some that are like, man, I think he got it. He understood it, right? He was seeing this the non-duality, the connection, the oneness, right? The connection with the divine consciousness and all that. And how I think that's the thing about it, is that Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas really wants the disciples to get it for themselves, right? There's a one of the sayings where Thomas calls him master, and he goes, I'm not your master. His whole goal is like, no, you can see right? Open your eyes, see for yourself, know for yourself, have your own experience of the divine. And like you said, that's one of my problems with the canon of scripture that we have today, is that people worship that Bible, and people will, it makes me really angry, because what we'll end up doing is we will read this Bible and sort of vicariously try to live off the fumes of what God was saying and doing in people's lives 2,000 years ago. Instead of like, what is God doing right now? Is God alive? Are you connected to the spirit of the living God right now? Because if you're not, who cares what he said to some guy named Paul 2,000 years ago, right? I mean, maybe it's helpful, but like, you can't just have that. We have to have our own experience. And again, that's what I loved about Thomas, because Jesus is constantly telling his disciples, wake up, stand up, see it for yourself, experience it for yourself. And once you've tasted it, once you've experienced it, once you know it for yourself, you've got it. You don't have to keep coming back over and over again, right? And again, this is why religious people don't like this kind of stuff, because religious people want to find a way. It's a revolving door, right? The little merry-go-round. Come on Sunday morning. We're going to sing songs about what a worm and a wretch, horrible person you are. At the end, we'll give you a little forgiveness, a little taste of, okay, God, you're okay with God again. And maybe you cry and whatever. Be sure to pass the plate. And then at the end, it's like, well, see you next week. Because we know as soon as you walk out that door, you're gonna be turned into a filthy worm again. You got to come back and do it all over again. And Jesus is not about that. It's not about religion at all. He's not trying to do that. He's trying to get his disciples, and he's trying to get us to wake up to our own, this connection we have with the divine that nothing could ever separate it. So we do get things like that. I mean, there are things in the scriptures, like when I was reading, I do a lot in this book of the Quantum Sayings of Jesus. I do a lot of connecting the dots between other sayings of Jesus, like in John, or even sayings of Paul in the book of Acts, or in Galatians, or in Colossians and Ephesians, where, again, these ideas, and this is what I think people don't need to understand this. They don't understand it. When you and I talk about consciousness, when we talk about, we are connected to the divine consciousness, and we are therefore connected to one another, and there's no separation between us, and non-duality, all of that. People say, that sounds like New Age teaching, right? You're just some New Age false prophet. Well, if I am, then so is Jesus. Because Jesus says in the Gospel of John that one day he says to his disciples, you don't get it now, but one day you're going to realize this: I'm in the Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. No separation between me and God. No separation between me and you. Not only no separation, I'm in God, and I'm in you, and you're in me, right? Paul writes, one of his very first letters that he writes is the Epistle to the Galatians. And it's mind-blowing too. If you think about this, Paul's letters were written before any of the Gospels were written. People don't know that, but like your New Testament is not arranged chronologically. Mark didn't come first. Matthew didn't come first. Paul's letters came first. And after Paul's letters, then came the Gospels. So when Paul writes his second letter that he writes to the church in Galatia, he says something that up to that point, no other Christian writing that we have found suggests something this radical. But what he says to these Christians in Galatia is, hey, in Christ, there's no male or female. There's no slave or free, rich or poor, black or white, gay or straight, any, think of it, just fill in the blank. Anything that turns into an us and them, right? Or a me and you, a separation. Paul says this thing that no one had ever said before that we know of, that's ever written down. He says to them, because we are all one in Christ. So those things are illusions. They don't mean anything. Again, that is exactly what Jesus is saying in Thomas, right? These ideas of recognizing that those things, those separations are illusions, that those aren't real. This is Christian doctrine. It appears in the New Testament. It comes out of the mouth of Jesus. It comes out of the mouth of Paul. It's just not emphasized as much, certainly not by Christianity today, not by evangelical conservative Christianity. They want to downplay those verses because their whole thing is building a religion, growing some institutional thing that exists to perpetuate itself. When Paul says in the book of Acts, he's talking to idol worshiping pagans, not Christians. He talks to people and says they don't even know who Christ is. They have no idea who God is. And he stands up and tells those people, those pagans, hey, God, this God you never heard of, this God is your father and you're this God's children. and this God loves you, and this God is reaching out to you, wanting you to know who he is, who this God is. And then he says, this God that you never even heard of is the one in whom we all live and move and have our being. So there's a connection between even idol worshiping pagans and this Christ, right? Again, just mind-blowing stuff. It's really all through Colossians, Ephesians. Paul says in Ephesians that we are all filled with the fullness of he who fills everything in every way. And in Colossians, he says that Christ is all and is in all. Again, these are Christian verses. These are scriptures, right? This is the Apostle Paul. This is Jesus. And so when Thomas is repeating those things, it's just Jesus emphasizing these things more than we see in other places. But it's not new. It's just the kind of thing that we need to see. And it's powerful. I mean, I'm convinced that this is the truth, that we all need to get it. Humanity needs to get it. I don't even care if you're a Christian or not. I don't care how you get it. You can get it. If you get it from Jesus, if you get it from the Gospel of Thomas, great. If you get it from Paul, Ephesians and Colossians, great. If you get it from the Gospel of John, great. But if you get it from Rumi, if you get it from Buddha, if you get it from Black Elk, if you get it from quantum science, that's good too. We just need to wake up as a human species, as a humanity. We have to wake up and realize that we are all connected to God, and we are all connected to one another. We are all brothers. We're all connected, right? We're all brothers and sisters, one huge family, one connected, one consciousness with many expressions. The quantum scientist says almost exactly the same thing. They use different words. They say that everything is the quantum field. In other words, everything we perceive around us, right? Our eyes, our senses are lying to us. It looks like that this is a microphone, and this is a book, and these are all separate things. Here's a pen, and then there's me, and then there's you, and I'm not. We're not each other. We're not connected. We're all separate beings and separate. There's just separate things in the universe. That's how we perceive the universe. Quantum science says that that's an illusion. That the only thing that there is, all that there ever is the quantum field. Everything is just an expression of the same thing. It's all an expression of the same quantum field. And you can just trade out the words. Instead of saying quantum field, say consciousness. Instead of saying consciousness, say source, say God, say Christ. And so it's all kind of the same ideas. And when and this is something, I think, again, it's so powerful. It's something I think it's so necessary for us to understand, because if we can get this, this is how we can do all the stuff that Jesus says to do in the Sermon on the Mount. When Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, that's easy to do. If when I look at my neighbor, I see myself, I see God, I see that connection, right? I don't see a separate person. I see someone just like me, who's an expression of the divine consciousness, just like me. That's how I can love my enemy, because I don't see an enemy. I see myself. I see Christ in that person. This is how we learn how to beat our swords into plowshares and study war no more. Because I can't go to war. I can't kill another person, because that person is me. That person is an expression of the same consciousness, the same divine, Christ. And so there is no separation. And I think if we can get it, this is how humanity we awaken to a shared consciousness, a shared divine consciousness that really changes us, and it ends up changing the world around us. Because again, until we change, the world will not change. That's how the world changes. We change. And we have to be the ones to make that evolution, to grow and transform that way. And it's really important.
That's so rich, so rich. One thing I noticed is like going from a person to go from like, what would I say? You have evangelical. I come from Pentecostalism. I think the only difference between evangelical and Pentecostals is evangelical has more white people, right? Mm-hmm. It is a different space. I have a chart of all the different denominations, and it's kind of very interesting looking at the chart of denominations where all these things aligned, but yet though they still are in this kind of in the same vein. What I think is kind of unique, and I would like to get your comment on it, is like Western Christianity versus Eastern Christianity. And does the East, or is there sects within, or sectors, if you will, within Christianity from the East that embraces this, or is there Christians out of all the Christian denominations? Are there some that actually are aligned with things like the Gospel of Thomas in the world?
Yeah, there might be some that I know of. I wouldn't say there's like some sort of Christian sect or denomination that fully, every one of them, they fully embrace the Gospel of Thomas. There are some maybe progressive Christian churches that would include it. Like there is a collection. It's called the New Testament. You can find it on Amazon, and it's the New Testament, but they've added in some of those Nag Hammadi texts, like the Gospel of Thomas, and I think maybe the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Truth is in there. I think the Apocryphon of John. So they do kind of, and it's kind of fun to have. I've got a copy of it. It's really interesting to be looking through the New Testament. You're flipping through it, and there's Matthew and Mark, and oh, there's Thomas, and then there's the Gospel of Truth, and oh, here's something, So there are individual Christians, maybe some smaller groups of Christians maybe that embrace it. I know that there are some groups that probably maybe kind of fringe. Like, I don't know that other Christians would call them Christians, but they would call themselves Christians. Like there's a unity group, like a unity church. And they definitely embrace, because there's a unity church here in El Paso, and I've spoken there a couple times. Well, I've spoken there once. I'm speaking there again in 2 weeks. And so they kind of like where I am at, right? They love Jesus, but they're not into the exclusion and the separation and the, that kind of thing. So there may be a handful, but they're not certainly not in the majority yet anyway. I think though, like since this book has come out, I've been blown away. How many people have read it, and just the reviews have been incredible, that it's really helped them to maybe connect with Jesus in ways they hadn't before, which I think is really exciting.
In writing this, of course, you just had the inspiration to do it, right? Because it's like I guess there may be other books within this, but what was your whole goal, would you say? And like, okay, I have this book, a person can read this, the book of Thomas, but I'm going to take this. And what was the whole goal if a person was to read your book, from your perspective, what was your goal in terms of like, here, I'm gonna provide this for you?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things, I guess. One goal is kind of what I just said, is like, I believe so much that this message of Jesus from Thomas, this idea that we need to wake up and we all need to see that we are absolutely connected to God. And, as Paul says in Romans, nothing will ever separate you from the love of God, not angels or demons, not the future, not the past, not even death. Nothing will ever separate you from God. And that Jesus says this, that in the Gospel of Thomas, and emphasizes this. It's such an important thing for us to get. We don't have to jump through any hoops. You don't have to do anything. You have to pray a prayer. You don't have to join a club, sign a doctrinal statement, none of that. If you're a human being and you're alive and you have a consciousness, the consciousness that you have is on loan from the divine consciousness, right? We're all an expression of the divine consciousness, and you could never be separated from it. It's like, it'd be like a drop of water if you poured it into the ocean and then like, now go pull that drop back out again. It's impossible, right? It is the ocean, and so we are the ocean in one drop, and one drop is the whole ocean. So that's such an important thing. I wanted people to really recognize that this was one of the foundational teachings of Jesus, as recorded by his disciples. These are, again, they talk about them as secret teachings. I cover this in the beginning, in the introduction of the book. But when we talk about these sayings of Jesus being secret or hidden, it's not they're not hidden because, we don't want anyone to know. They're hidden in the way, it's like it's right in front of your face, but you don't see it. And you just need someone to point it out to you. But once you see it, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. And so it's one of these things where Jesus has a wonderful saying there. He talks about, he says, I think it's saying 12, if I remember correctly. He says something like, a man old in years will not hesitate to ask a newborn child like 6 days old the meaning of life, and he will receive an answer. And the idea behind that is that when we're infants, when we're brand new, before the world has sort of pulled something over our eyes, we are awake. We do see it. We get it. And it's only later on as we grow and mature, we kind of lose that awareness. And Jesus wants to wake us back up to it. He wants to reconnect us to that original awareness of who we really are, of who we are connected to God and therefore to one another. So that was my number one goal. I just wanted people to recognize the power and the truth and the significance of this idea. We are not separated from God. We're not wretches and worms. We don't have to deserve anything. This idea that when people say God loves you, it's like, yeah, but do you deserve it? Or I don't deserve it. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's like saying the sky is blue and then asking, does the sky deserve to be blue? It's the sky. It's blue. You're made in the image of God. God is love. That's your image. You're loved. That there's nothing to change that. And then to recognize as well, like, it's not just individuals, not just me. It's not just that I'm connected to God in this incredible way. You are too. Everyone is. And if we are all so connected to the divine, as Jesus said, he prayed that we would be one in the same way that he and the Father were one. That's a mind-blowing way of being one, right? That oneness. But that's the same oneness we have with not only with God, but with one another. And that means I am connected to you and you are connected to me. And that also can't be separated. Any more than I can be separated from the divine consciousness, I can't be separated from you. And you can't be separated from me. And again, I think recognizing that changes everything. So my hope is that people that read this book come away with that they really get it, that they, and Jesus says it 114 times. There's 114 sayings. He says it every possible way so that we hopefully come away with, we don't forget this, we get it. We understand this truth because I think it's really important. I also wrote it, and the way that I wrote it, because there's 114 sayings, it's difficult to read it like chapters. Like all my other books are just like you read chapter 3 and you keep reading to chapter 4, and you could read 3 or 4 chapters, in a row. 114 sayings are a lot of sayings. Probably not going to read this all in one sitting. So I think I encourage people when they're reading it to maybe treat it like almost like a devotional. Get up in the morning, get your coffee, sit down at the table, open this up, read one of the sayings, saying 15, saying 16, whatever. Read it, read my commentary on it, read what I have to say about it, think about it throughout your day. And then, tomorrow morning, read the next one. I think it's something that it needs to slowly kind of permeate our minds and our consciousness, and so that we finally get it and we finally wake up to this truth.
One question I have, and then I'm going to get to some of the people's questions, and that is giving people more of a concept of non-dualism, because of course that's in the book, and you mentioned it, non-dualism and how it relates to Jesus and the Gospel of Thomas.
Yeah, it's a big deal. In fact, if I can find it, this is one of my favorite sayings. Saying 22 is really, I love this saying. And I think it's actually one of these critical sayings in Thomas. There's a couple of sayings that are very difficult to understand. And I'm convinced that understanding saying 22 is the key to understanding some of the most difficult sayings that you find elsewhere in Thomas. Because Jesus says this, and probably this I think saying 22 is the most blatant and obvious statement of non-dualism I think you could find in the Gospel of Thomas. It starts off, it says, Jesus saw some infants who were being suckled, and he said to his disciples, "These infants being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom." And they said to him, "Shall we then become infants to enter the kingdom?" And Jesus said to them, "When you make the two into one, when you make the inside as the outside, and the outside as the inside, and the upper as the lower, when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male is not male and the female is not female, when you make eyes in place of an eye, and a hand in place of a hand, a foot in place of a foot, an image in place of an image, then you shall enter the kingdom." And it's this radical statement. He says it every possible way. He, again, similar to what Paul says in Galatians, only Jesus goes much deeper here. It's not just there's no male and no female, no Jew and no Gentile. Here in saying 22, Jesus is saying there's no inside or outside. There's no upper or lower. There's no even the male or female is like to the point where they're so one, you can't tell which is which, right? There is no separation line between them. That same idea, by the way, is when Jesus talks about in the Gospel of John, when he says, I'm the vine and you're the branches. Have you ever looked at like a grapevine or something or a vine with a branch? When does the vine become the branch? When does the branch become the vine? Like where's the separation between vines and branches? They're kind of the same thing, right? So Jesus is like, I'm the vine and you're the branches, but they're the same, right? So recognizing that, and it's the question, and this happens a couple of times in Thomas, it happens in the other Gospels too, where Jesus sometimes will even ask them, who do you say I am? Or the disciples will ask, who are you? And that kind of thing. It seems in Thomas, what Jesus is asking his disciples and what he wants his disciples to understand is, who are you? Right? He wants us to say, who am I? And to wake up and recognize who we are, because we are one in Christ. We are connected to the divine consciousness. Everything that's true of Jesus is true of us. And so, again, that's probably one of the other reasons why I think a lot of early Christians didn't like these kinds of teachings that were from Thomas, because, they want to keep, when you're building a religion, Jesus has to be, all these wonderful things have to be true only of Jesus, right? So only Jesus is the Son of God. Only Jesus is the Christ. Only Jesus, all these things they're only true of Jesus, and they're, not you and me. Who are we? We're just worms and wretches, and we could never that. And that's Jesus, right? But Jesus doesn't talk like that. Even in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he says, these things that I have done, you're going to do greater things than I have done. Well, what's that about? When has that ever happened, right? When does anyone talk about that? So, in fact, Paul also goes this in direction too. Paul constantly talks about Christ and says, because, this is true of Christ, but it's also true of you, right? He says that Christ was crucified, and so you've been crucified. And Christ was raised from the dead, and you've been raised from the dead. And Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father, and now you are, not you will be, you are right now seated at the right hand of the Father. And this kind of language, again, it's in Thomas, but it's also in other places. It's really not as scandalous as I think people want us to think it is. It's just that it's not as strongly emphasized by Christian pastors and Bible teachers today. They don't like talking about those things. They don't like quoting those verses. But when we go to Thomas and we see Jesus over and over and over emphasizing this kind of thing, letting us know that this idea of duality, of separateness, that's not the way things really are. The reality of the universe is, again, either everything is the quantum field and the quantum field is everything, or everything is consciousness and we're all connected to that same divine consciousness.
Whoa, that's so powerful. How we got to this point, right, within our consciousness, with who we are as people. I always say, like I said it earlier, talking to someone, and it was kind of like whatever happened to the God that enslaved people in this country, for instance. What happened to the God that everyone kind of agreed to, like this God that did things to other people, but all of a sudden, like, we decided that God was wrong or we were wrong. I mean, so spiritual evolution, I consider this part of spiritual evolution where we're able to, it's like one of the biggest things that we suffer from is our consciousness, in terms of being able to see things like the systems of the church, and being able to call it out for ourselves, not even for someone else. Like, you're not wearing that shirt for the sake of calling another individual out. You're calling yourself out.
That's right. I'm saying this. I'm not part of this anymore. Yeah. And trust me, they don't want me in there. They've told me they don't want me in there, right? So it's not just me saying I've left. It's like, that guy, he's not with us.
We do have let's see, I think I separated some of these, just get to okay, I think this was a good one. We not necessarily do with the book, but Ruben in the Chicago area says, what perpetuated your evolution? Is that what that preceded?
Yeah, I think it says that.
I don't know. What your evolution? How did you get to this point?
Oh man. Well, like I said, I kind of had two deconstructions, right? I had the first deconstruction that was really more recognizing the big aha for me, coming out of conservative evangelical Christianity, kind of raised a white Christian, evangelical, grew up in Texas, was a member of the NRA, voted straight ticket Republican. I thought you couldn't be a Christian if you voted Democrat. I mean, I listened to Rush Limbaugh, all that stuff. So I needed a lot of deconstruction. And so the thing that kind of pushed me out of that was someone explained to me that the gospel that Jesus preaches has nothing to do with saying a prayer so you can go to heaven when you die. And I was licensed and ordained as a pastor, had been for like 6 or 7 years at that point. And I had never heard that in my life. It just blew my mind. I was like, wait, what? And then it rocked me so hard. I just thought, if I'm wrong about the gospel, what else am I wrong about? And so that's when I started on this journey that eventually led me to write those 7 books, right? Jesus Undefeated is about looking at the doctrine of hell. Jesus Unforsaken is looking at the doctrine of penal substitutionary atonement theory. Why did Jesus die on the cross? And Jesus Unexpected is about the second coming and the rapture and all that stuff. So I just started pulling on these threads and asking these questions and studying for myself. And my mind was getting blown. It was my beliefs were changing radically. And that's when I went through my first deconstruction. But I still, during that time, I still really was convinced that Christ was only in Christians, and you had to pray a prayer and you had to make some kind of decision, walk the aisle or whatever. But that Christ wasn't in you unless you were a Christian. And I had a good friend of mine, his name is Jamal Javanji. He and I did a podcast together for like 6 years. And, that guy never let me off the hook. Almost every episode we recorded, he would get me in a conversation about an argument really about this. And I just argue with him that he was wrong and I was right. And a few years later, it took a while, but I can just remember the day that I saw, and I mentioned it earlier, the scripture in Ephesians, I think it is, that says that we are filled with the fullness of Christ, who fills everything in every way. And so if Christ fills everything in every way, it makes no sense to talk about any person who's not filled with Christ. How could that be possible? If it was possible, then that verse is wrong and Christ doesn't fill everything in every way. But I'm convinced it does, that Christ does fill everything in every way. Paul is talking about that. And so that was a major radical shift for me. But sort of this second deconstruction that I'm currently going through, where I kind of just decided I didn't want to be, the guy that defends the Bible anymore. I don't want to be Mr. Christian anymore. I'm not trying to protect Christianity, or the Bible or anything like that. Although again, I still love Jesus. I still very much look to Jesus as a wonderful teacher, someone who really did understand, he really had this Christ consciousness. But recognizing that many other people did too, and recognizing that I can find truth and I can experience the divine through the words of Christ or through the words of other people, or even just for myself. And that's really been probably in the last, I would say 2 or 3 years. And that's where I've ended up now. So I wrote those 2 books, Sola Mysterium and Sola Deus. Then I wrote this one, and I'm continuing on that path. So like currently I'm just starting to work on another weekly kind of commentary on the Inner Circle thing that I'm doing. And now we're going through the Gospel of Truth, which is another text that was lost, that was discovered in Nag Hammadi, and finding a lot of really amazing truth in that text as well.
Good. I'm looking at we got quite a few questions. This was asked a few times, and I think some people had addressed it. I'm not sure if this is related to your text or not.
Yeah.
So is Judas in heaven? So is Judas go to hell or to heaven? And then there's some other people ask about believing, Miss Marie, I believe, about believing in hell.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, wow. Well, I would say again, if we're asking that, if the person asking that question is still looking at their spirituality through the lens of the Bible and Christianity, in other words, like, if they're asking me, does the Bible support this idea that Judas is in hell or heaven? If that's the lens I'm using, again, I have a whole book on this called Jesus Undefeated. It looks at the 3 different Christian biblical views from the scriptures on hell. Eternal conscious torment is one of them. Annihilation is the other Christian view from the beginning of Christianity. And universal reconciliation is the other view. I embrace the idea of universal reconciliation, which is the idea that because everyone's in Christ, it's impossible to be separated from Christ. Paul says even death won't separate you from Christ. Those metaphors in the Bible, when it uses those metaphors of fire, the lake of fire and the flames and the fire and brimstone and all that stuff. What's funny is that in the Old Testament, the first couple of times we see those phrases used, it talks about the refiner's fire, but it also says in the same metaphor, it's a fuller's soap. The refiner's fire and the fuller's soap. No one was ever killed by soap. Soap won't kill you. Soap won't even torture you. So what's the context of that fire? The context of the fire is always purification, right? And that metaphor is used all through Scripture, right? Paul uses it when he talks about sort of like, in fact, it's it's a universalist text where Paul talks about how he says, all of us will be tested by the fire. All of us will pass through the fire. Some of us, the fire that we pass through will reveal gold and silver and precious stones, and that's what will remain. Everything else will be burned away and cease to exist, right? But the good things, the things we've done for Christ, the good things we've done for our fellow man, those things, those good works will be sort of revealed by the fire. The fire is intended to burn away the bad and reveal the good, purification. But then Paul says, mind-blowing stuff, same text. Then he says, and some will pass through the fire and nothing will be left. Absolutely everything will be destroyed and burned up because it's worth nothing. There is nothing good in this person. And then he says, and yet they will be saved. That's just one verse. I could do a whole episode on this, but so many verses, I talk about this in the book. So many verses point to the idea that, I'll just summarize it this way. Of those 3 views, you're not, whichever of those 3 views you hold, and you have scriptures to back up, right? Whichever of those 3 views of hell you have. Here's what you need to recognize. You're not just saying what you believe about the afterlife. You're saying what you believe about the character of God. You're either saying that God is a torturer who tortures his children for eternity, or you're saying God is a destroyer, meaning people he doesn't like, the people that aren't good, they just burn up and they cease to exist. That's annihilation. Or God is a good father who heals and transforms and restores his children and does what he said he's going to do, which is to make all things new. And if God has that intention and has the power, I don't think anything will stop God from doing that. So, all 3 of those views use the metaphor of fire, and we have to recognize that's a metaphor. It's not actual fire, right? No one's like pulling out the Bic lighter and, whatever. That's not what's happening. It's a metaphor. But in the universal reconciliation view, which again is a Christian view the church has held from the very beginning, the purpose of that fire is not to destroy us or to torture us. It's to heal and purify. So no, my answer would be Judas is not in hell the way we think of it. He might be going through some kind of a purification process that isn't very pleasant. But when you get there, when we die and we wake up into the divine consciousness and we look around, we'll probably see someone that looks like Judas and say, yep, there he is. And we'll be glad to see him and he'll be happy to see us.
We're so, for me, it's like humans are so human.
Yeah.
And the spiritual practices that whether we once had or we experience, how do we come to where we are with language? How do we come to where we are with technology. If especially in the private community, I'll get deeper in this because I'm into Federico Fagan, who was a physicist who did created the microprocessor. Like, you use his inventions all the time. He worked with IBM.
Wow.
But he was the person that he talks a lot about AI in the sense where we're not going to create consciousness. It's like, and we are not computers. I talked about this on my last talk. We are not computers.
Right.
Like, we are, and we have the God element. We are spiritual beings, right?
Yes.
In this body. And the thing is we want to limit ourselves and limit who God is and what God is to fit the construct.
That's right.
So we have to have that construct, because the minute that people begin to know who they truly are and what they're capable of, all of a sudden you don't have just singular people out able to pull things from the quantum and bring it into this 3D dimension, which you're doing. Like, you're coming out of yourself and moving yourself into higher states of awareness, higher states of consciousness, right, into the quantum realm, and able to pull these and download this information, right? There's no different than what you're doing, as far as I'm concerned. There's no difference in what you're doing, and depending on how it works, than anyone else in these scriptures. We just need 1,000 years to figure out if this is what people will feel.
Yeah.
Right? Most people will feel, honestly, the level of consciousness that people had, I think they had great intuition in, let's say, in those days, 3,000 years. There was some, it's all you really had was certain levels of intuition for weather. You barely had language, right? You had some form of language. Our language has grown significantly over the last 2,000 years. And so it's hard for us to fit and look at the level of consciousness that was even available in terms of being able to, you can research, you can go and look up information, you can go and check all kinds of different things that people didn't have. And so you're pushing us and moving us, and it makes people really uncomfortable to have these discussions, because I'll tell you, I mean, getting into the quantum space, it's like, if you just look at science and epigenetics, and you take generations of mice and you shock those mice in one generation with the sound, 10 generations later, you can make the sounds and the mice will jump.
Yeah.
On the 27th, I have a guy that is born in Congo, and he's but he's in Canada, and he talks about Black religious trauma. But he knows about religious trauma throughout the world. He's in Canada currently, but he has a study that talks about the older Jewish men who were, he asked the question, what dog do you think these men were afraid of? It was one particular dog that they were afraid of, even if they never came into contact with this particular dog. And of course, people said the German Shepherd.
Right.
Because it was used. And so epigenetics are amazing. So a lot of my study is getting even deeper into, like, being able to hear what you're talking about is almost like an aha moment. It's almost like, yes, this resonates with my spirit. I feel more free. Like, each moment as we get into expanding our consciousness, we just feel more free and more free and more free. And I'll tell you, if what we have to say doesn't resonate with you, if you want to believe that we are wrong and that there is a hell and that people are burning in hell, is no different than if you want to believe in the demonic forces that are out there causing people to do different things, right? You can believe that, but I want to raise our consciousness so that we can understand that maybe we can shift some things in people's lives. Maybe we can bring some things to their lives earlier in their lives so that we can actually move them. So this book that we're talking about, if you just coming on, this book is The Quantum Teachings of Jesus by Brother Keith Giles here. It always happens to us as I go along, it starts picking up, and a lot of people they tune in, and so
yeah,
I want to let people know what that is. And so, but I believe your question was answered, Ruben, maybe, but I think he was really asking like what led up to this. What was there something, I guess maybe was there a distinct moment that you like, you know, I can't do this anymore, and just, you know, begin to just completely leave?
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, there wasn't one major thing. You know, it honestly was a kind of a slow progression of just different things. You know, yeah, and like I said, for me, it was probably for some reason I wrestled for so long with this idea of like Christ was not in everybody, and then recognizing that Christ was in everybody was a very big deal to me. So yeah, that was one pretty major thing. Though the other thing was, I guess, that I struggled with was when I was writing Sola Deus, I was trying to figure out, again, I'm already open to this idea of oneness with the divine and all that. But I was wrestling with the question of whether pantheism was a better way to explain God or panentheism. And I started leaning, I was already kind of into the panentheism side. I started leaning to the pantheism side. And then I realized that the answer to the question, I was like, is it pantheism or is it panentheism? The answer is yes, that it's a mystery, that God, in other words, in some way, they're both right. And I can't explain that. But again, all I can say is that God is a mystery. And in some ways, God is everyone. And in some ways, God is in everyone. Because there is a relational thing. I think there is a relationship. That was what got me. That was the thing that finally convinced me. I was like, if we're just God and that's it, then who am I talking to? Right? Who's communicating to me? Right? Something's happening here, right? It seems like, how can God be love? You need a subject, an object to love, right? There's got to be some relationship going on. And I really believe whatever God is, it is a relational force, energy, being. And so I thought it's got to be, somehow they're both true. I can't explain it. But you know what? When I was an evangelical Christian, I believed in the Trinity and I couldn't explain that either. And I was totally fine with the fact that I couldn't explain it. So now I'm just comfortable saying, I don't understand it. I can't explain it, but this is where I'm at right now. But yeah, there was no major shock to my system. There was no major event or something that kind of just like, whoa, it was game over. It was kind of a slow progression for me.
Has it been a progression from when you begin this journey till the quantum sayings of Jesus?
Yes. Oh yeah. And it's still going, by the way. I'm not done yet. I always even tell people, like, don't let the cement dry, you know, keep your hands open. This is the problem, I think. When people learn something new, even like what I'm talking about, right? Oh my gosh, this quantum thing, and this is so amazing. And then we're so quick to just be like, okay, that's it. And we're done. We stop learning. Now someone says something that contradicts that or challenges that. Nope, I don't want to hear it. You're wrong. You know, I'm nervous because, you know, you're challenging what I think is true. But like, you know, we're too quick to make up our minds on something. I just encourage people, like, you know what? Stay curious. Lean into the mystery, lean into the awe and the wonder. I think that's really what Jesus is saying to us about being like little children, right? Children are always asking questions. But why? But why? But why? Yes. Stay that way. Stay curious. Stay, you know, into that sense of wonder. And don't be so quick to decide that you've got it all figured out. You know, what I've learned about myself over my whole spiritual journey is that I was wrong before. I'm probably wrong about some things right now, and I guarantee I'm going to be wrong in the future. So it's not about being right. It's not about having all the right answers to everything. It's okay even to say, I don't know. You know, you don't have to have it figured out.
I think the minute that we believe that we figured it out is the minute that it's almost like we're moving into a lot of ego.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't You know, I don't necessarily believe the people say edging God out, ego, but I think ego is just a part of who we are. It's just more of balancing it.
It's right. You can't get rid of your ego. You'll never get rid of your ego.
No.
You need to make friends with it.
Yeah. I say
you need to realize you need an ego for certain things. And it's okay to even address your ego and say, hey, I understand you're doing what you're doing because you want to protect me and you don't want me to get hurt and, you know, whatever. But hey, it's okay. I got it. You're going to be okay. Just rest. You know, you can sit back and you don't have to drive the ship all the time.
Ego. When I think ego, I think of addressing the ego, especially when I look at it, I'm looking to create various courses when it comes to expanded consciousness. And people say, hey, how do I expand my consciousness? What does it mean to expand my consciousness? And some of the constructs that a person may have to experience, you might like this, is that the whole entire world would have to understand deconstructing. America specifically, you can experience, like everyone can experience some level of deconstructing, because to the atheists, right, or they have some kind of connection or relationship with someone talking about the deity that we call God. And then to the individual that's I talked to a kid that was brought around spirituality and, working in a spiritual bookstore, if you will. Mm-hmm. And he was like disconnected. Like I wasn't raised that way. And so I believe like this, and there's a lot of things that I think can benefit a person, but our entire infrastructure of our country is built on, and it's hard for people to see it. It is religion, but our entire infrastructure of this country is built on religion and is built on specifically Christianity.
Yep.
And whether it was like, this is what the forefathers wanted, it was a version of Christianity. We have morphed and changed into a lot of different things. And so therefore, if we were to me, expanding the consciousness and being able to deconstruct who you are spiritually, what does it look like, right? And then when we get into Christendom, I always have the question, if I'm doing coaching, I always have the question, like, how did you grow up in a religious standpoint? If you were disconnected, it wasn't there. My dad went, my mom went, or we didn't go. I mean, there's always a story. And being Black American, I would say there's a really strong connection to our experience in America, across the world, but I'm here. So it's like our experience to Christianity, and what does that mean for, if you look at us. And before we begin this, and I thought, I know my people would love this, because you were able to articulate, and we were talking about the deconstructing, the deconstructing, and even Bishop Pearson really didn't speak on it much, because I don't think it was, when did deconstructing, or that term, even come about? Would you know?
It's probably been around maybe close to maybe 9 or 10 years now.
Wow.
Probably started with people like Rob Bell. I don't know the first one to ever use it, but definitely it started becoming a metaphor for questioning. I think before deconstruction, there was something called the emerging church movement. That was like in the 90s. And I was a part of that, but that was not as intense as the deconstruction. So I think the emerging movement kind of became the deconstruction movement. We were talking before we hit record, we were talking about this, about how I've run into a few people that are Black that have deconstructed, but not a lot. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and he said, in some ways, deconstruction is kind of a white thing. In a way, it's almost like a white privilege, because I think white people can afford to kind of walk away from the church, even if they grew up in the church, even if they were a pastor's son or whatever. It's much easier for them to deconstruct and walk away from it than I think people in the Black church. And so, I think he may be right about that.
Oh my goodness. I know some people that work in this space, and I'm going to get you together with Christian A. Smith, and he does it. He works within this space in Atlanta.
Okay.
And there is everything from songs there's a lot of songs that we sing. There's even songs that we shouldn't sing.
No, I know. I have my own list. The songs
Right.
to me that are horrible. Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible. I mean, the first thing you have to do, if we look at the scale of levels of consciousness, this is Dr. David Hawkins, a great psychiatrist. And shame, guilt, right? Fear. It's like the first thing the church has to do is they have to say you're a piece of trash.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You're no good.
You're a worm. You're a wretch. That's right. There's nothing good in me. I don't deserve it. I couldn't earn it. All that. Yeah.
And the minute that I'm tearing you down, and they do this at the young age, I'm gonna tear you down so that I get to build you back up.
That's right.
And the thing is like, I question even epigenetics in terms of how the Black church has been so ingrained.
Yes.
Like hardcore ingrained in the only place. I mean, learning to read was a lot of times with the Bible.
But a Bible that had been carefully edited to not mention the parts, right, about being set free from slavery and things like that, and emphasizing the parts about, submit to your masters and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's right. And you're right. You're right. Generations of that. Think about that. Generations of the Black church that it's just, I mean, how many layers, right? How many times has this been repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated? Generations and generations. And if this is the way, we talked about filters, right? If this is the filter you're using when you talk about God, when you talk about Jesus, and it's kind of corrupted like that, it's got stuff in there that's, there's strings on it, it's manipulated a little bit to kind of make sure it was just, in other words, it was designed to control Black people. And that kind of stuff. I mean, this is the reason. I mean, I have no business talking about this because I'm a white guy, but I've heard Killer Mike, right? I heard him once doing an interview talking about, he was asking that question, like, why? He was like, go into Black churches and they have a white Jesus. Why is Jesus white? You know what I mean? And that's that same kind of thing. It's just carrying over that whiteness of Jesus and this Black church that kind of inherited at least a white curated faith, and
some of them talk about how it was like originally it was Black, but I mean, of course, Christianity started, of course, in the continent of Africa, if you will.
Yes, that's right. It did. That's the irony. Yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but that would be still probably closer related to, even today, would be closer related to Eastern practices of Christianity, which would be different than Western forms of Christianity. But it's like everything you just said is such a mouthful because it's so tied to the identity.
Yes.
And let alone the consumer side, right? And the capitalistic side of the church system. And they steady trying to, it's like the minute that someone gets too big, they're going to come and they're going to slice you up and they're going to tear you down because you're not doing something right.
Yep.
And I think even within the church, like you don't even have to be a person that's deconstructing, or you don't have to even be a person that is talking like we are talking. You can be a person that says, go get saved and Jesus is this, and say all the same things. But if you have too many lights, right? If you do too much and you have too many people coming to your church, they're going to build a whole entire, there's people building entire platforms on YouTube to basically tear other Christians down. And that's what really gets me, is like, I'm going to come and tear Keith down, but he's not as fun as, some of these other people. But what you said right there is 100% something I think that needs to be said. And I think deconstructing the Black church, one of my dear closest friends who I am getting involved with this community is Miss Dorothy Parker, Dr. Parker. She says deconstruction in the Black church looks different for Black people then.
Yeah.
Which gives the appearance that we have not been deconstructing.
Oh, that's good.
Well, here's the deal. I do have a comment to that. This is deep into this conversation, so somebody have to listen to it because it's coming towards somebody. But inclusion is like a level of accepting everybody.
Yeah.
Right. That you are included.
Yeah.
But inclusion allows us to keep all of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It allows us to keep the same songs, and it allows us to keep everything that is a part of what we're accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yet though we get to be, let's say, gay.
Yep.
You know, because there's a lot of what do you call same gender loving people.
Yep.
That have always been in the church.
Yes, always. Yes.
You know, and it's real prevalent. I can't say that of a lot of, I grew up around a lot of churches, and I can't say I've been to a lot of white churches where I knew specifically like, oh, that choir director's gay, and you know, that musician's gay. Like it's been prevalent. And so deconstructing in this space it's a lot different because there's a lot of identity tied to it. And there's a lot of things. And so I'm kind of in that space myself where it's not looking to even just deconstruct. Someone asked me today, so do you consider yourself a Christian? And I'm like, it's hard for me to consider myself a Christian from the context of what people believe and know, because Pentecostalism and evangelicalism owns that. They get to own God. If you mention the word God anywhere, that means church, right?
That's right. Yeah. In everybody's, you know, talk about consciousness, right? There's sort of a cultural consciousness, like a zeitgeist. Ooh. Yeah. And that's right. So that's why I'm also nervous about that too. Like saying I'm a Christian, because it kind of, people have assumptions, right? And so when they even ask you, are you a Christian? I kind of want to know, what do you mean by that? Right. Do you mean, you know, someone like the guy on TVN that's asking people to send him money? No, I'm not like that. Do you mean someone that really, you know, is like very political and everything is all about politics? Like, no, that's not me. You know, and so like, if what you ask, if I'm a Christian, do you mean, hey, do I love Jesus? Do I really appreciate the things that he says? Am I trying to live my life in a way that kind of follows the Jesus pattern? Yeah, I'm trying to. And I think that's something we should all be working on. But you know, it depends on what you mean by that. But usually I'm nervous about saying I'm a Christian because most of the time people ask it, they're asking really if I agree with them on their theology. And usually I don't.
No. Well, and the thing is the surface level of Christianity, like we have more theologians on TikTok.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are pretty good.
Some of them are great, but there's a big chunk of these people that are just carrying on with what gospel Hollywood. I have a whole theory.
Yeah.
With gospel Hollywood, I went to Oral Roberts University, and my bachelor's was in mass communications and multimedia, and we got strategically trained to actually bring corporate America style marketing to the church. And it was highly, highly, highly successful.
Yep.
And that's the reason why we have what we have today in terms of the mass marketing of Christianity in the very sect. It's interesting because evangelicals and Pentecostals are probably a smaller sect within the global population of Christianity. I mean, it's a sect, but yet though it seems like everything because it's the loudest.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
that's right.
It's all out there. But what I know is we have to keep going, brother, and we have to keep bringing things like this. I appreciate you for bringing this to the just to the world, and we want to push it out there. I think there was another because I can do this. I can do this all night, man. I just love it.
Yeah.
There was some there. I thought there was a particular comment.
Yeah. Bring it up.
Yep. We talked about that with the oh, I thought this was funny.
Yeah.
Miss Elisa said.
And that's okay too. You know, if you don't deconstruct, you just walk away. You know, I don't blame you. I mean, it just depends on what's at stake for you. And if you think it's worth it, there's something to work for, to salvage that's worth saving, you know?
I did
it's not.
I did in 2015. I'm a musician. So I was in church, pretty much dedicated all, you know, loosely for probably 10 years prior to that, you know, but 2015 was the time that I completely was comfortable with actually saying, no, I'm done. Yeah. I was comfortable with saying, like, I am no longer a part of this and I'm okay. You know, yeah. I'm a pastor. I'm a PK.
Yeah.
And so I'm okay with it, and I'm more than okay with it. This is something that I'm embracing.
Yes.
Because it was, I mean, it has been a process. I didn't necessarily, I think the trauma or the situations that I would have that would be more of traumatic would be how people make you feel for doing it. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. I want to make you feel a certain way for making the decision because I feel this way. And I think a lot of people feel, you know, everything that they've been, you know, they have said, you know, there's demons and there's, you know, it's a lot of fear pumped. And if you do this, then it's
a lot of fear. It's fear and shame and guilt. That's what I noticed. Those are the only three tools they have. And so when you disagree with them or when you walk away, they will come at you with one of those three things or all three. Fear, like you said, oh, God's going to get you, you know, you're going to go to hell. And shame, like, oh my gosh, you know, what have you done? I'll pray for you. And guilt, right? They want to make you feel one of those three ways. And because that's how they manipulate you. That's how they keep you there, actually. They use fear and shame and guilt, try to keep you there. Once you start thinking for yourself, asking these kind of questions, you start pulling on that thread and you realize, oh my gosh, this isn't what I thought it was. And you walk away. They will. I always thought it was funny because they'll use fear and shame and guilt, but usually they'll attach it to like a scripture verse or something. Yeah. It's like, I know that verse. I taught that. What are you talking about? I never heard that verse before. Like, I know that verse. You know, tell me anything I don't know. I just have decided that doesn't matter to me anymore.
Yeah, I can make it where that doesn't matter. I can make that text where it's just like, okay, so, I mean, like, what other text can you get from the Bible that you want to use?
That's right.
To make it work for you.
That's right. People have always done that. You can literally, if you know, I think I've seen people talk about things like this. Like, if you want to be, like, if you want to own slaves, you can turn to the Bible and find justification for that. If you want to commit genocide, you can find a proof in the Bible to tell you that's okay. I mean, you can decide ahead of time what you want to believe and what you want to do, and then you can find verses in the Bible to support it. And people have done that, and they do that right now. So that's really, for me, why, like, someone quotes a Bible verse, it's like, yeah, well, I could quote some other ones. So what, right? That doesn't have a hold on me anymore. I'm not living my life by the Bible says this or the Bible says that. So yeah, it really doesn't do much for me.
Inclusion enables for us to break free from the bondage of organization. I believe personally it does help you. Inclusion helps you. To me, it's a personal feeling to feel included or not included. And so, you know, organized religion to me is part of the construct of, just as me personally, I'm like, you get a 501c3.
Yeah.
Once you get that 501c3 and it's faith-based, now I'm organizing based on the system so that I can actually have my freedoms to have, you know, I can worship the way I want to. So you have to go through this system.
Yeah.
in order for it to work. And my thing is like, technically, it's like we really don't have to have that system, and the system can actually change. The system should change.
Yes.
Just no different than anything else in our country needs.
That's right. Yeah.
That needs a change. But I do understand that people that were once in church, or the people that are in church, want to do something different. So what do? We create another denomination, right?
Yes.
This denomination does this, and the thing is I'm okay with it. Like, I have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
You know? And I have a choice whether if I want to go or not, and I enjoy not going.
Yes, me too. Me too. I love it. I love waking up on Sunday mornings. I sleep late. I don't have to go to sit and listen to someone go on and on and on. Yeah, I don't have any need for anything like that.
Did you have to do that as a kid?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I grew up probably about that time. Like I said, I was like maybe 5th, 6th grade. My parents finally, we started going to church and things like that. And then I was a pastor for a while. So, I remember Sunday mornings waking up like I had to go. I had no choice, And I was just like, I can't believe I got to get up and go and get on stage and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I'm so glad I'm not doing that now. I just don't need it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not in a place where I feel like I need, I have community. I have communities of people that love me, that I can be myself. I can be vulnerable and transparent with them. And I believe they want the best for me and I want the best for them. And we care about each other. That's what if you want to call that church, but I don't, it's just, but it's a community. And that's all I need. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yes. That's what I'm formulating here working is community. And so that's the whole goal is, as we build community here, people can follow your pages and be able to connect to some of the podcasts and some of the things you have going on, so that we can formulate and build this community. There was a story I heard of a lady constantly telling her husband, he was kind of fed up with her always wanting him to go to church. And she was just like telling him, honey, you got to get up. You need to go to church. And he was like, I don't want to do that. And she just kept going and going. And he was like, I don't want to do that. And she's like, you got to get up and go to church. You're the pastor.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know that feeling.
I'll tell you, as a kid and the things that I experienced, and they were just doing what we do. And I have a lot of great stories of going to church. I didn't raise my kids in church like I was raised. Of course, they've attended and done different things, but we didn't. And I do desire community. I do desire that people have understanding of their spiritual self and who they are. But I believe also we can get that in numerous different ways in our lives. But this has been wonderful. I believe we've been rocking and rolling here, and everyone, there's different. I love all the comments, guys. I appreciate the comments. I always like when people have their conversations.
Yeah.
Right. And helping individual people out. This is one that I wanted to hit.
That was great.
Person. Religion was always contradictory and confusing. Isn't inclusion about all of us being one? Oh yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it. I believe absolutely. It's about, but I think inclusion in the sense when Carlton Pearson originally did it was just where Carlton was, so that he can bridge that gap in the church. I believe inclusion is a great construct. It's good. You are included. I believe it's a great construct. But when we start operating also in this, the divinity of expansion of oneness of who we are, it's even bigger than inclusion, because sometime when you have, it's kind of like John Thomas is on here. When we talk about the unconditional love of God, there's still condition within that. That we could say something unconditional, but there's still conditional. So we say the absolute.
There you go.
God's love is absolutely. So
that's right.
It's nothing. There's nothing wrong with it, and you can actually attend and go and be a part. That is a beautiful thing because you still have community. You still have all of these things.
Yeah.
Right. But I still feel like the constructs of organized religion, it still can have its way, right, of still doing things to an individual, right? Of not allowing them to really expand to the vastness of God. But and that's just Malachi. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, what I find sad, and Dana, I love your comment, and what I find sad with the church is when sometimes they'll even talk that way, like everyone's welcome, but sometimes, no, not everyone's welcome, or you're welcome if, you know what I mean? And I think that's when you're deconstructing. When I went through deconstruction, and I've talked to a lot of people who've gone through deconstruction, that's the most painful thing, I think, is that when you experience, so you change your mind about something, right? Up until that point, you're loved, you're welcome, everyone thinks you're great, but then they suddenly find out you don't agree with them on that, or you changed your mind about this. And now suddenly you realized, you thought they loved you because of who you were. When you find out is, no, they loved you because they thought you agreed with them. When they find out you don't, and you're not like them and you don't agree with them, now suddenly, you're not welcome anymore. My kids can't play with your kids anymore. I can't, you know what I mean? They push you away. And when you recognize how conditional that love is from the church, and you get rejected, that's the worst. That's one of the most painful things I think about deconstruction, is being rejected by the people, like this is, I run a thing called Square One, and it's kind of a coaching thing to help people going through deconstruction and helping them navigate their process and stuff. And we talk about that's one of the first things I think we cover is, why does it hurt so much, right? And that it's because any other crisis you go through, right? Think about that. You lose your job, someone dies, you get cancer, something horrible happens, right? Some major thing happens in your life, especially if you're raised in the church. Your support system is your pastor, right? Your church community and your family. And for so many people, when you deconstruct, those three groups of people who are your support system for any other kind of, anxiety or struggle you go through, all of a sudden, your pastor rejects you, your family is like, oh, you don't believe this anymore. And your community, your church community, like, they pretend they don't recognize you at Costco or whatever. And then, that's it. So it makes it even more painful. It's painful enough that you're questioning things you believed, but you have to now do this all alone because that support system you depended on for everything else is gone.
Yes, most definitely. There was Miss Dorothy had this comment that I thought was really great, that inclusion was born out of the need for a new paradigm of thinking about heaven and hell.
Yeah.
And that absolutely right. And I also believe that inclusion was birthed from exclusion.
Yes.
Right. And it kind of can go with that unconditional, conditional.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's that we told the line when it's just like, I have a group, and then who's in this group, who would I want to be in this group, who can be in this group, can I be in this group even though I don't fully agree with everything you got to say?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, that's my thing, man, is just, oh gosh, just some of the things, I guess it just brings up so many memories when it's like you go to a church and you do everything. I went to a church recently, a concert, and they do everything. It wasn't even an inclusive church, although it had to be sort of inclusive because half of the people on the stage singing were gay.
Right.
But it was almost like, I felt almost like it was like an act or something we were doing because that's what we always been doing.
Right.
So we have, we got to shout, we got to dance, we got to do all these. And it's like, as I was a part of it, I was sitting there and they were telling me what to do. Like, God's going to honor your praise. Like, he's going to do this as you do this. And I'm like, no. I'm not
Yeah.
getting up to do what you telling me to do.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
but now it's like I'm in the room and the odd one out where I like, do I have to do this? Like, okay, so I'm really gonna be the devil because I'm gonna be sitting here like,
Yeah. I'm not doing this. Yeah.
I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate you for your time, sir. Guys, I want to make sure that if the quantum sayings of Jesus, it is available on Amazon. You also have a website, I believe. It used to be, no, it was in the other platform.
Yeah. Well, my blog is keithgiles.com.
Yeah, your blog. Yeah.
You can find me there. Yeah.
I'm going to post that there. It is keithgiles.com.
That's right. Yep. That's my blog.
So, and then books are mainly purchased on Amazon.
Yeah. All my books are on Amazon. Yeah. If you want to check out any of them, including the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, it's on Amazon right now.
Okay. So you guys can check out his blog there. Also, you could follow him on social media platforms. I know you're in fact on Facebook. You post.
Yeah, I'm mainly on Facebook and Instagram. I am on TikTok now and again. On Twitter as rarely as possible, and I'm on YouTube as well. So I have a YouTube channel as well. So yeah, and then I do podcasts. So I've got I do a podcast every Wednesday night. It's live on Sirius XM Radio on John Fugelsang's show. It's called The God Squad. So every Wednesday night we do an hour segment called The God Squad. And then that's going to spin off on Thursday, July 4th into a brand new podcast. That'll be kind of like this, kind of live on social media. So that's July 4th, The God Squad. And then I have a solo podcast called Second Cup with Keith. It comes out every other week. And then I have a kind of a main podcast I've been doing for years called Heretic Happy Hour.
Oh yeah, I like that. That's really, really cool. So
I love it. It's fun.
For the most part, if they go to so they can follow all this, if they go to your Facebook, is that where everything would be?
Probably.
Posted?
Yeah, I think if you follow me on Facebook, you'll end up being connected to everything else that I do.
Okay, good. Yeah. So that people can, and I'll make sure that you go to Amazon and purchase a book, and it's good quality material.
Yes, thank you.
For sure, especially this latest one. I'm a real book Kindle, and I'll tell you right now, I might want to put you up to the task of doing reading it. You got a mic?
Yeah.
Have you ever done those?
What do you mean? Like an audio? Oh, no. The audiobook is in process. Yeah. So I have a guy that's done all of my audiobooks. His name is Eric Morrison. So he's narrated all my audiobooks. So he's working on this one right now. It takes him but maybe take about a month. But the audiobook should be up. Yeah. Probably in about a month.
I like Audible.
Yeah. A lot of people do.
I really, 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 really like Audible. Cool. Thank you so much. This was an enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Oh, he says he's listening to you on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go.
Awesome. So you guys want to it's available on. You can look him up on Apple.
Yep.
And
like I said, I've got 2 on there now, and then another one coming on July 4th.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, until next week, guys, I really appreciate you tapping in, tuning in, and staying on for this time. There is another thing that I have to announce. One of my dear friends and function as a coach. Anybody that's a coach should have a coach. And so what I'm doing is doing something completely different. He told me, he's like, you need to post it and get it out there. And I'm going to go ahead and this weekend and upload all my content that I have. But boom, I got the expanded conscious community, right? So this is on a school platform. I want you guys to see this. So if you go to school.com, expanded consciousness, this is basically, there's a free side of this community, and then there's going to be a paid side of this community where we can then we probably wouldn't be on this long on this side of the platform. We would end up flipping and switching so that you guys can have more time or intimate time with guests, with myself. And so I want you to go to the School Expanded Consciousness. If you go there and sign up for that, I will be posting personal messages in there. And also I'll send you guys an email from the Divine Authentic Self. So a lot of things that will happen. This is going to be my home base. I don't know if you're familiar with people moving into building communities. So you can have Facebook, but you don't get to you don't really get to control all of the content and things that are in there.
Yeah.
And so this is going to provide a space so that I have more control and I have more, and I can do stuff. I can have giveaways, some coaching in there. And this is the free side, and then there's a paid side, right? And on the paid side, it's minimal. It's 22. It'll be 22 a month, but we'll have a lot going on within the paid side of the community so that we can all keep moving forward. There will be a mini course and full courses on authentic self, deconstructing courses, right? So that you can actually have something to participate with. And the other thing I'll do within this community too is a lot of the videos that it takes a lot. I have probably read and listened to well over 500 books probably in the last couple years. And then videos, YouTube, I have so many resources, and it can help you when a person filters through, because there's so much stuff that's kind of like, I found this is really neat, Keith, is I have a anesthesiologist that talks about consciousness.
Ooh, wow.
It's so neat. Like,
yeah,
so neat. I'm in contact with having him on the show because the thing is most people don't understand, but his job is to play with consciousness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
From a medical perspective, but also he's into ketamine. So he understands plant-based medicine and how to move in and out. And honestly, I'll tell you, there's some people that may need a little bit of assistance to help them with certain things that they deal with.
Yes.
With even religious trauma, and to get over it. And so
yes,
I appreciate you so much for being a part. Appreciate all you guys for being.
Thank you, man. This was great.
Yeah. And we'll look forward to doing it again. And we got some comments rolling.
I want to say what my friend says, which my friend John Fugelsang says. I'm not saying that Trump is the Antichrist, but I am saying that Christ is the anti-Trump. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I just see that popped up. I thought that was hilarious.
That's good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir. And we look forward to, maybe a couple of months. You have any new books coming out?
Oh, this one just came out. So it's going to be a while before I have another one out, but I am working on a bunch of things. So next time I get a book, I'll let you know.
Please let me know. You do have a publishing company with other authors.
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, I became the co-owner of the publishing company, Choir Publishing. So they published all my books, and then the guy that started it decided he wanted to step away, felt like he was holding it back. And so he approached me and another author, Matthew DiStefano, at Choir, and asked us if the two of us wanted to take it over. And so we've been running it now since January of last year, and it's been fantastic. It's been really great. So so I'm now the co-owner of Choir Publishing.
I need to have a chat with you, because I want to get into that space, but I want to get into the space from, of course, I'm working with Miss Dorothy to do my first book on expanded consciousness and unlocking your potential beyond belief.
That's awesome.
But I would like to get in the publishing space also for expanded consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So I'm willing to
let's talk.
Do whatever I need. I'm a documentarian producer.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Of that nature. So we'll chat. Yeah, Chicago at the Crossroads on Amazon Prime is one of the documentaries. We have a new documentary coming out that's called Why Trump. It's literally a 4-part series.
Wow.
Like it's incredible. We had people at the insurrection that we didn't know what was going to happen, and they were there filming.
Man.
So it's behind the scene footage, people falling from the top of there, breaking their legs and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, what the heck is going on?
Wow.
It's insane.
That sounds amazing.
It is amazing. Like, no, I have footage of me. When he came to Tulsa, like literally, like I boots on the ground and we were there, and like it was honestly, as a documentarian, it was incredible. And so I have big dreams, big visions. But anyways, I appreciate you, brother, and look forward to speaking again and staying connected.
Yeah, same here, man. This has been great. And yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch. Thank you all so much. Thanks everybody for all the comments too. I appreciate it.
Most definitely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.